bear approximately the size of the minivan, and we decided the bears could have that jacket. So the next morning, we started walking down the beach on the edge of the Bering Sea. You can see our tiny, very light packs. You can get all of the world's lightest gear, but when you go for 20-something days, it eventually is pretty heavy. There's some pretty good beach combing on the Alaska Peninsula. That's a whale rib bone. You can actually see the bare tooth marks in them. There was all kinds of wild critters. Did you know there was beach porcupines? Yeah. You do now. Japanese glass balls. These haven't been in use since the 50s. This is like the ultimate beach find. Yeah. This is so remote. We left dozens of these things just sitting around because we weren't adding any weight to the packs. And that evening, after a very long hike, we ended up at one of the world's most spectacular campsites. Pavlov and Pavlov's sister volcanoes are about 9,000 feet tall, and they are 20 miles from the sea. For any rock climbers in the room, the Idolene pinnacles there on the right, only the tiny one at the far right has ever been climbed. That is some of the most tempting unclimbed objectives left in the world. It is also probably the world's worst climbing approach covered by bears. But they're very sexy. We weren't the only ones who thought this is a great beach campsite. This is an Aleut fishing little camp. It's a little sod hut, which was the traditional use of the people. The Aleut are the people who invented the kayak. They came over from Russia. Interesting side note, until they had European contact, you're 600 miles from the nearest tree here. The cultural belief was that the driftwood they used to build kayaks was from a plant that grew at the bottom of the ocean because they had never seen trees. So we took a rest day and we fished a little creek coming into the Bering Sea. The fish in this creek were not little. That is the Bering Sea breakers in the background. It's hard to get them chromer than that. And if you've never caught a chinook salmon, there is no nookie like chinookie. It's Mike hooked up to a big old fish. So part of our strategy on this trip for dealing with 21 days of food was that we didn't bring 21 days of food. We took a bet on catching fish. Some of us took a bigger bet than others. Matt took a 10-day bet. Got stressful at times. But this particular Jack Chinook was alive 5 minutes before this photo was taken. And there is fresh fish and there is fresh fish. After lunch, the fishing stayed rather good. I'm wearing a really stupid hat here. You're going to see a lot of pictures of me wearing really stupid hats, and even some of Matt and Justin wearing really stupid hats. Right here, let's see. This is Mike holding maybe the most ridiculous fish I've ever witnessed in person in my whole life. That thing's head is like 14 inches across. Not warm. It was coming off a glacier on the Idolene pinnacles.
There he goes. Dude. That was one of the sickest things I've ever witnessed in my entire life.
That's the general mood of the day and the entirety of this trip. It is fish country. There we go. So, we had to start hiking down the beach again. You'll notice the steaming on the beaches. These volcanoes are active. The sand is warm. There were still neighbors on the beach.
Nice shot.
Including some wolf neighbors. That's a full-size granola bar. That's a big doggy right there. Eventually we got real sick of those giant packs on our back. So we did some contemplating about the wisdom of pack rafting in the Bering Sea, which on this day went very, very well. We had a tailwind and we just covered coast. And there was some, it's pretty coast. The black volcanic sand there is pretty spectacular. There were also neighbors on the beach. Those are entirely bear tracks around this dead whale. We landed, we looked at this whale, we got back in the boats. Partly because this is the remains of a bear eaten by the other bears at the whale. And dead whales don't smell that great. Who knew? We ended at another deeply spectacular campsite. And maybe one of my favorite rivers I've ever fished on the planet. I'm going to tell you this river has no name, and that's not because I'm being coy, that's because this river has no name. And that is the beauty of a place as wild as the Alaska Peninsula. It's like fishing Starhope Creek if there were gigantic freaking fish in it all over the place. This is Mike hooked up to about a 15-pound chinook. Notice the size of the creek. Oh, and tenor on the bank.
It's such a ridiculous fish to be in this creek.
Look at it in a sec. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Too bad the net's down below. Just, 15-pound chinook. A creek that's like 10 feet wide. No big deal. Stripping the Dalai Lama.
Guys, don't fish Dalai Lamas here. You should fish everywhere.
Yeah,
It's the greatest fly there is.
Yeah.
In Alaska, it's the only fly there is.
Oh!
So this is how good the fishing is. You can lose that fish and no one cared. In that pool, not in that creek, in that pool, we caught that chinook, 3 rainbows on mice, the smallest of which was probably 20 inches long, a sockeye, 2 steelhead kelps that were down migrating, and two dolly barb. There's the steelhead, one of the steelhead. They weren't even supposed to be there. We were bycatching steelhead accidentally. So we kept going down the coast. To surprise, more neighbors. This river has a name. This is Steelhead Creek. Pretty good guess why. At Steelhead Creek, we had to go inland to link another river. Here's some Steelhead Creek fishing. So we had to start hiking over the tundra. And hiking over the tundra is not the easiest hiking there is.
Right.
This video is from Nunivak Island this last fall. Very similar tundra, but it gives an impression
Tundra
of what it's
hiking
like.
is hard to describe, so thought I'd just show. In Lump World, and you go up, and you go down, and you go across, then you hop from lump to lump. But it's Lump World.
It's like, Mike calls it high stepping and long stepping because that's what you're doing all day. Unless you're
Tundra
in a
hiking
swamp.
is hard.
Let's see here. Keep going. There's also a lot of wildlife on the tundra. The caribou had clearly never seen people. Those caribou we probably first saw at 500 yards and ran to about 15 yards from us. And we had that happen again and again because they're herd animals. There's nothing tall but them on the tundra. So they'd see you, they'd run over, they'd stop, they'd be like, holy shit, you are not a caribou. And they would turn around and run. It was really cool to see. And we fished tiny little creeks that we saw. And as you've seen, one of the amazing things about Alaska is that basically anyone can catch giant fish. So it takes a lot of skill to catch really little fish. And I'll give it to Matt, very skilled catch. And we did some to link rivers. We even did some dirty tricks like dragging the boats over the tundra. At a certain point, you really don't want the weight on your back. And we ended up on, this river is called the David. We think we may have been the first modern descent of this river. The Aleut, once again, kayak builders certainly at some point had, but the upper 30 miles of this we floated, probably no one has in the last 100 years. You can see Matt, being an ex-Olympic Nordic athlete, found about a 30-pound caribou antler and decided to add to his pack weight for the last 2 weeks of the trip. So we were heading to this river called the Caribou. It should be called the freaking Covered in Bears River because it's freaking covered in bears. And we knew we had a big day. We had to do a little hike across the tundra into a tributary of it and start floating. And this is an hour and 40 minutes into the day. And this is a beautiful river, very shallow, very gorgeous. And there were some big old sockeye salmon to be caught. Sockeye are cool fish. And the giant eagles. Now, right about when this picture was taken, we made a strategic error. You'll notice there's like high banks and places to camp. And we stopped, we had some water, and Mike, who is by far the smartest of us, which is why he did not drive from Twin to be here this evening, said, this is a really good campsite. We should camp here. This is at like 5 p.m. But we didn't have packs on our back. It was really nice to be floating. And the least smart of us, this guy, was like, we should keep going. If there's campsites here, there's campsites everywhere. There was not campsites everywhere. And we finally found this little quicksand, I cannot call it sand, it was literally quicksand bar. And you know, there are some basic rules for campsite selection. Not on places that are going to flood, because why would this river go up and it's raining all the time and raining while this picture is taken? Not on bear trails. And, you know, probably not in the wind. So we went for it, and none of the tent stakes would stay up because it was quicksand. And the river kept rising. So, and we're, you know, we're pushing 10 hours into the day at this point. So we got back in the boats and we started floating into the most endless swamp you have ever seen. And as it got later, in a 30-minute time span, we jumped 3 bears in 30 minutes in the river. Came around a blind bend in the boats to a bear in the river. And it became very clear that we needed to not be on that river. And we eventually came around a bend, and the river opened up, and there was 12 bears in a row across the river. And I called it a phalanx of bears. And we were like, okay, it is time, really time to get off this river. And about 400 yards away across this marsh, you could see something that resembled potentially not marsh. Notice the time here. This is the beginning of the marsh hike, so we started dragging boats through chest-deep marsh. Mike's making fun of me for videoing that. Full sufferfest. This is why, once again, you bring an Olympic Nordic skier with you to see how to do the break trail in situations like this. Key pro tip. Here we are, it's 11 p.m. You can almost see where we're headed on the horizon.
Be the fan.
Nice technique.
And it's midnight.
Here we are. Still not there yet. Luckily the boys are now to the third veg. The grass.
24-hour daylight-ish lets you do amazing things. 23-and-a-half-hour daylight.
Here we are.
This is July. So we finally made camp at 2 a.m. And the hope was that in the morning we would get up and there would not be a phalanx of bears. And in the morning we got up and there was a 13th bear. And we dragged back across the marsh to the river. And luckily by the time we got to the river, which took hours, it had gotten high sun. And there was sort of just one giant bear left. And you can see it, he's the little dot off there. Unfortunately, he's exactly where we were headed. And we just walked right past him. He didn't care, we didn't care. But later that afternoon, the river got real narrow, like half the width of this room narrow. And we were floating 3 packrafts side by side, which takes up a lot of that river. And the wind was screaming, and there was high brush on either side. And this enormous woofing sound came out of a brush, and a head about that big around stuck out of the brush, close enough Mike probably could have petted him on the nose if he wanted. And luckily, that bear turned and spun. I do not ever need to be that close to a coastal brown bear, ever again. So we went back to hiking, and the weather got good, and the volcanoes got real good. It's Sun Valley, there's probably some skiers in this room. Pavlov on the left has been climbed twice and never skied. Pavlov's sister on the right has been climbed once and never skied. Those are 8,000-foot glacier descents. So if you're looking for a first descent and you want a really long way to get to it, there you go. And we ended up in the end on a river called the Sapsa. And this is a river that you can go to and go to a lodge. The Aleut tribe has a lodge on this river called Aleutian Angling. I have been privileged in my life to have fished a lot of amazing rivers. This is one of the most amazing rivers on the planet. This is one of the last places there is a very healthy chinook run. This is one of the last places in the world that you can go and catch half a dozen steelhead a day swinging. This river gets about 500,000 sockeye a year, and it's one of the few rivers in the world in which sockeye want to eat swung flies. Has neighbors, but once again, lots of sockeye. Steelhead that we were accidentally catching, wasn't even steelhead season. And some fairly big kings. This one was a lifetime
He's
fish.
got a big boy.
I'm not gonna play the whole video, we'll see it jump here in a sec.
Oh my God. He's got
Lifetime fish. So, as you can see, the sun was out. The wind was not blowing. I released a 40-pound chinook. I sat down on the bow of the pack raft to soak in the moment. And there was a little rumble, and the volcano started erupting. Which is about as good as being outside gets. Our days paddling off the Sapsuck weren't bad either. This river, truly, if you ever get the chance, the people at Aleutian Angling, the tribe, could not have been more welcoming to us. The fishing is obscene, and the landscape is more obscene than the fishing. I may someday get it together to do a hosted trip out there, and if I ever do, I'll let you guys know. Our final camp on the Sapsuck. And we paddled across this big old open bay. Like, open water pack rafting in saltwater is kind of scary, and fogged in was kind of extra scary. But we eventually ended up in the 33-person village of Nelson Lagoon, where people could not have been kinder. Like I said, this is the tribal corporation's warehouse, where we showed up and they're like, hey, you want to stay? You want dinner? You want food? You want us to fire up the fuel oil heater for the showers that gets barged in once a year so you can take a shower after 21 days? The Aleut are really cool people. This is one of my favorite Aleut people. This is my friend Felicia, and one of her 56 walrus tooth collection. She's a heck of a walrus tooth collector. And our plan to leave was that there's a weekly scheduled flight that hops out the peninsula. And when we got there, people in Nelson Lagoon thought it was hilarious that we thought that plane was coming. And we learned that that plane, in fact, was not coming. And we said, how do we leave? And they said, you call Guy. And the man with the epic mustache is Guy Perret. He is a legendary Alaskan bush pilot. And underneath that sweater, I shit you not, he is wearing a Backwoods Mountain Sports t-shirt. He lives in Bellevue in the winter and has for 30 years. This is Nelson Lagoon. This is where people have been living for thousands of years. This is a place that at the current rate of the Bering Sea pack ice disappearance with climate change has reduced the pack ice that keeps the Bering Sea every winter from eating their village. They think they have 10 years, and they have already figured out where they're going, and nobody seemed concerned about it. The world can end. The Aleut and the next people I'm going to tell you about, the Chupik, are going to be just fine. The rest of us are screwed. These guys have it dialed. So we ended up in Cold Bay. This is the Cold Bay ambulance. It has paint on one side because in the winter, the 80-mile-an-hour wind and sand off the Bering Sea strips the upwind paint sides off of cars. We were also told the story that there's no morgue in Cold Bay, but there are about 100 bears in town. So if somebody dies, until you can fly them out, you just stick them in the ambulance. We got stuck there for 3 extra days by the weather, but we did find some stuff to do. So this is a pretty special trip. And the thing about doing pretty special trips is that you come off of them and you're like, what is the next pretty special trip? And in my research for my various trips, I like reading scientific journal articles. And I came across this one. It's from 1967. It's an Alaska Department of Fish and Game Fisheries Resource Survey. Raise your hands if you've ever heard of Nunivak Island before this moment. Few of you. I hadn't. It's out in the Bering Sea. This report had some interesting things for a fisherman's perspective, including this quote: "Descriptions of this fish indicate that both resident rainbows and steelhead may be present." And steelhead may be present. And I had the realization that perhaps there was about a dozen rivers on the south end of the island that maybe had steelhead and had maybe never been steelhead fished before. 220-mile walk to find out. And as I said at the beginning of this, you have to choose your partners for these things. And I was contemplating who that was going to be. And in the midst of that contemplation, my father passed away. And my dad was my original fishing buddy. And I kind of fell in love with the idea of doing one more trip with him. So I was alone out on Nunivak, but I wasn't that alone out on Nunivak. I'm not going to do the blow-by-blow on this because you've had enough blow-by-blow already. I'm just going to give you a little bit of taste of what Nunivak Island is. It's approximately, it's a big shield volcano. You kind of see the volcano sort of in the middle of my circle. I sort of did a big loop over the western end of the island. I am hopefully this fall going back to do a big loop over the eastern end of the island because I cannot not see the eastern end of the island, having seen the western end of the island. It's a cool landscape. Being a big shield volcano, but also Arctic tundra, wild. Amazing light. I have been joking that that Nunivak is Chupik for really frickin' windy, but it may in fact be Chupik for Rainbow Island. What you have there is these super fast moving storm systems, a really flat island, and in September, sun that never comes high across the horizon, constant rainbows. I saw more rainbows in 25 days than I've seen in the last 25 years. And some really pretty rivers. The rivers, they're essentially big spring creeks. It's just, they're coming right out of the tundra. They have this fine black volcanic gravel on the bottom. It's really easy wading. And by having no trees on the landscape, they are just stunning. And the privilege for me of walking up to these rivers with the very real belief that I was about to cast the first fly ever cast into this river. It's very exciting. Now, I do want to say something about the first fly not being the first to fish. The Chupik people have been on Nunivak for about 8,000 years. They are incredibly resourceful hunter-gatherers. It is one of the world's last true subsistence societies. These rivers have very much been fished. These people are incredible stewards of that land. We think of wilderness as meaning having no people. This is a human wilderness, right? There was no one on the south end of the island at the time of year I was down there, because that's not when you go down there. They go down and fish chum salmon very early in the summer for a couple weeks. But they have done an incredible job. In 25 days, I saw literally one piece of human garbage. And it was a Coke can up the river that I'm pretty sure a seagull carried up from the sea. And I put up this picture. This is on the last river I fished on this trip. And you can see that golden tundra. And an insight to the way people's mind works there. The next day, I saw my first human. So the evening of day 24. His name was Jim Shavings. He was up hunting and fishing. And when he said, "Where the hell did you come from?" And I said, "Well, I've been walking a 24-day loop around the island." He did not say what people here say, which is, "Holy shit, that's a really dumb thing to do." He said, "You saw the tundra change color. It was green when you got here, and it's gold now." There is a level of awareness of environment in that culture that is incredible. And it is incredible to get to meet. And when I go back, one of my biggest goals is to spend a lot more time in the little tiny town of Makoriak, where all 300 of the world's two big people live. It's also incredible wildlife. I was told by a biologist before this trip that I would see a tremendous amount of waterfowl. That is the greatest understatement I have ever heard in my entire life. I probably saw 10,000 ducks, geese, swans, eiders, puffins a day, sandhill cranes. It is insane. The soundtrack of the birds is endless. And there are also some really cool animals. These are muskox. Muskox are sort of the alpha animal there. They are real ornery. I thought I kept a really good distance from muskox. When I got to Macoriac and showed people there my photos, they said you were way too close to those muskox. They have a really unique fur. So kivia, muskox underfur, is the most expensive natural fiber in the world. It is 8 times warmer than wool by weight. It is 4 times finer than cashmere, and it is about $500 an ounce because there is no domestication of muskox. Like I said, they are really ornery critters. But if you want to touch some after this, I brought some. It smells like muskox. Oh, so this, I should preface this. This gives an example of really crappy hiking on Nunivak in an attempt to avoid muskox.
Hiking through trampoline swamp to avoid herd of muskox over there that are where I need to be going. Big old ball up on the hill there. He's in the way too. So I'm in the swamp.
So I walked way around that bowl, but it was mating season.
Yes. Hello.
He came to me.
Moving. I would love if you'd keep moving. Please? Very please? You don't want to be in the swamp. There's your friends over there. Just go over your friends. They're chilling.
You can't hear in the videos. Muskox are really cool. Let's see. Oh, this is my favorite wildlife encounter maybe ever. So one of the weird things about Nunivak, if you've been to Alaska during salmon season, there's a smell because there are dead salmon all over the banks because the bears drag them out. On Nunivak, there are no bears. Until about 2011, there was occasionally polar bears. They shot the last polar bear there in 2011. The pack ice from St. Lawrence Island no longer comes down and stays down long enough for there to be polar bears. So there are no dead fish on the bank. And I was on this river, and there were dead fish on the bank. And I was like, this is really weird. And about every 100 yards, there was a new dead fish. And I started to notice a pattern.
Dead fish, dead gull. Fox tracks.
So
Smart fox.
every one of these, there was a little hole in the opening right beside the fish, and a dead seagull and fox tracks. This fox was setting traps. He was going into the water, he was dragging out dead salmon, and he was setting traps for birds, which is a pretty amazing wildlife-y thing to witness.
Another one.
There's also dead whales on the beach, no bears, so this one was like pretty intact compared to the one on the peninsula. Also stinky. When you're alone, you don't have people to put in photos to give a sense of the landscape, and you slowly lose your mind. So you start doing things like taking lots of pictures of your tent. Nunivak is a place where you can take a lot of really pretty tent pictures because the campsite quality is very, very high. Everything looks really flat, and it's not. It's all these little micro lumps. It's actually very hard to find a tent site. But highly aesthetic camping. So this was particularly aesthetic. That's an Arctic solar halo. Yeah. It's formed by ice crystals high in the atmosphere. And that morning I woke up, this was about 10 days to go, and the birds were all gone. And it was very cold. And I went, oh. And I was remembering all those like Arctic explorer books about what does the halo mean? This is what the halo means. And the halo lived after about 5 days.
5 days?
Yeah, it got kind of wet, wild, and woolly. Stayed real pretty though. And when it cleared up, This is the best 1 a.m. pee break I've ever taken in my life. When the aurora is that strong, I did not know you can hear it. It makes sort of a subtle high voltage power line sound. Best picture I've ever taken not wearing any pants.
Okay, to show berry density, I just picked a random piece here. And it is just freaking blueberry bonanza.
Yeah. So
I
there,
can pick them to add them to my breakfast inside of the tent festival.
so many berries on the tundra, I could pick them inside of my tent festival in all but 2 camps. I would have
Huge advantage.
I would have lost 10 more pounds on this trip, but I ate like 5 pounds of berries a day.
Nunivak Island. Okay, to show berry density.
That's my berry-stained pants. So this campsite, this is a special one. This is a place called Ingramut, and I was talking about the Chupik people, and the story of the Chupik people is unfortunately the story of Native Americans everywhere. Europeans arrived very late on this island. The first sort of sustained European contact didn't happen until about 1910. And it was missionaries. 1910, there was about 3,500 people on Nunivak Island and about 5 villages. One of those villages was at the place where this tent picture is taken. By 1930, there was 800 people in one village. Spanish flu, typhus, smallpox, diphtheria killed them all. This village was haunting. Though there was no more remains of the sod houses, but you could see where they all were, because 1,000 years of walking paths in the tundra were still there. Really haunting place to be, really beautiful. But this is to you, so let's talk about fishing in rivers where nobody fishes. I'm gonna spoiler alert this, there's not gonna be a bunch of steelhead pictures at the end of this. But the coho salmon fishing is outrageous. This day with the sun out, this river has this, I was saying, that black volcanic bottom. I was swinging flies for very chrome coho coming out of the sea. And as they came to destroy my fly, you could see the sunlight reflecting off their silver side coming across the black gravel to eat your fly. It is about as sexy as fly fishing gets. Here's a big old coho,
At
not a
this
chromer.
massive fire truck of a coho. I hooked 2. Holy shit. He's so red, I was like, oh man, sockeye ate it. I decided to turn around and grab it, but you can see it in the river. But no, just 20-pound coho. Slowly kicking my ass.
All those
At this map.
they're just beautiful fish. And once again, tasty fish. I took a bet. I had 8 dinners that I did not have with me at the start of the trip that relied on fish. And luckily they were there to be had. I was telling Amanda earlier, coho are the fish we all want steelhead to be. They are just as strong, they are just as angry, they maybe jump more, they're just as pretty, they really like eating swung flies, and they're incredibly abundant in certain places. And they like eating poppers. Popper fishing for cohos, but I didn't have a GoPro, so I just like precariously, it was so good, I was like, I gotta record this, so I like precariously stuck my phone in the front of my waders and sort of went for it. Kind of watched the fly here.
Whoa!
Subtle little strikes. I'm not going to watch
That was freaking cool.
I'm not going to make you watch the whole fight, but I probably had 10 fish eat the popper in that pool, and my tent's about 10 feet away from me there. This is a particularly beautiful fish. So I finally came off the tundra and into Macoriac. And I'm not going to show pictures of people in Macoriac because I didn't ask anybody for permission to show their picture on a public forum like this, and I think it would be wrong not to. But I do want to say this is a place where this is the industry. They're reindeer herders. This is the exact level of exposure that I wish Backwoods had here. This is the once a month local newspaper. When your ad is open, same place, you have achieved total knowledge in your community of your business. And I love that is a sealskin parka she's selling there in the picture. This is where you go to take a bath or do your laundry in Macoriac because there is no running water. Macoriac is not a good place to live. The Chupik, after everybody died, moved to a place called Nash Harbor because it was a good place to be a subsistence hunter. And in 1970, the Bureau of Indian Affairs built a school in what's now Macoriac because it was a good place to build a runway, and everyone was told, you're moving. So the nearest water source, fresh water source, is 10 miles from Macoriac. So the Washateria here is the social hub of Macoriac. And yet it is a place so friendly. This is 40 minutes after I walked into town, knowing no one. I had a key to the city office's trailer in my hand, an offer to stay in the bunk there, and an invitation to dinner. Highly recommend Macoriac, Alaska. It's one of my favorite little villages ever. I cannot wait to be back there. And I will tell you one more quick story. In Macoriac, my last morning, I met an elder there named Tom Noatak. And he told me a story about his father, Andrew. Andrew Noatak was born in 1895. He died in 1995. So he was born pre-sustained European contact. In his lifetime, he remembered living in sod huts, hunting bowhead whales with mammoth ivory spears out of walrus skin boats. And he lived to see wind power and the internet in Macoriac. So, one of the logistical challenges of this trip was getting fuel out to the island. There's one barge every 6 months, and it goes out from this town called Bethel, because you absolutely cannot put fuel in a plane to fly it over there. And in Bethel, there's a really cool company called Papa Bear Adventures, run by a really cool guy named Justin Essien. And this is where all of you come in because all of you can do the trip that I'm about to show you. Papa Bear has a really cool business model. He is a do-it-yourself Western Alaskan river float outfitter. So you can bring as much or as little gear as you want. You can get off the plane in Bethel with your waders on, a duffel with your clothes, and a fly rod in your hand, and he has a plane packed with a raft, frame, tents, sleeping bags, coolers shopped and packed on a list you sent ahead of time. We saw a dude load about 10 cases of beer into a plane, if that's your thing. And he can fly you to the top of one of the world's greatest trout streams, names you have probably heard, like the Connectoc, the Aralic, the Good News, the Holitna, the Kisaralic, the Queefluck. These are a bunch of the greatest trout streams and salmon producing factories on Earth. Justin was kind enough to stick some fuel on that barge for me ahead of time. And when I got back from Nunivak, I sent him a thank you email. And a few weeks went by and I got a reply email. It said, looks like you had a really cool trip. I don't know if this is something you'd be interested in, but I have these Packrafts people emailing me. And they want to do trips. And he's like, and I'd have to scout some stuff to get permitting from the refuge. I don't really know anything about that. But it seems like you do. If I flew you around for free, would you be interested in developing some routes for me? Yeah, I would. So I called my friends Matt and Justin, and I was like, boys, saddle up. So this is a big picture view of our route. Gives you a sense of scale of Alaska. That's Bristol Bay on the right, Naknek. And this is the mouth of the Kuskokwim River on the left there. If you've never seen the mouth of a river that drains half a continent, seeing the Kuskokwim is pretty impressive. Closer view of our route. So basically what we did is we started on a maybe never before, except like one time, maybe a week before, us, rafted and fished a river called Canooktip Creek. We floated for 5 days into a river you've probably heard of, into the Connecticut. And then we hiked out of the Connecticut over the tundra into the Middle Fork of the Eek. And the Middle Fork of the Eek was kind of the real reason for this. There was nowhere to land a float plane in the upper 60 miles of this river, so nobody ever floats it. What we were hoping for was, as we were referring to, an old growth rainbow trout. So the coolest part of all of this is getting on a de Havilland beaver. If you did nothing else but just get on a de Havilland beaver, you have already won in Alaska. This is the coolest airplanes there are. This one, our pilot showed us at the end, the last day we flew out, they don't make planes like this anymore because the machining is so fine that you can turn the throttle down till you can hear each one of the 12 cylinders fire one at a time. And we got a quick aerial view of the Middle Fork of the Eek flying over, and it looked like it wasn't going to suck. Then we landed on Canooktip Lake, which also didn't suck. It's a pretty good first night campsite. I actually, right before I took this picture, I went out, I hiked up on the hill to take a pee break, and I peed, and I looked up, and there was a wolf staring at me about 50 yards away. And we got to look down the valley, and that didn't look like it was going to suck either. And so we started, and part of the reason Canooktip isn't run but is a perfect pack raft expedition is that it starts out as a really shallow little thing. It'd be kind of a nightmare in a full-size, full-weight raft. But an 11-pound boat can start doing some stuff. It also has some fairly technical whitewater, I suspect, at high levels, high flows. It's really, really pretty little river. Super cool alternative start to the standard Pagadi Lake start to the Connecticut.
Sorry, Patty, what month was this?
This is Canooktip Creek.
No, what month?
Oh, this is July.
Yeah.
And we were kind of, it was sort of a weird July this year. Rivers in western Alaska were really, really high. Salmon were kind of late. So up high on Canooktip, we didn't have salmon yet. We did have some beautiful rainbow trout, it's beautiful grayling. But eventually we got down into the salmon. And once you get into the salmon, in a river system that gets about, the totality of the Connecticut system gets about 2.5 million sockeye a year, you really start getting into the fish. Here's Justin getting his butt kicked by a fish.
Angry
Not
salmon.
his butt kicked. He very much landed this fish and it was gorgeous. Gives you a sense of the size of the creek.
Real angry salmon. Alright, I'm gonna go with the net.
And had neighbors. It's Alaska. Slightly less big than the neighbors on the peninsula. Interesting thing, we saw bear sign on essentially every single gravel bar we were on. We laid eyes on one bear in 3 weeks. And I think these bears are much warier than the peninsula bears. And I think there is a consistent downstream wind here. I suspect they were always there and we were constantly sort of blowing them out ahead of us. But there was cool things like, I wish the scale captured how big the moose skulls really are. And how bright the fireweed really is. And how many mosquitoes there freaking are in western Alaska in July. They're really only bad mornings and evenings in camp. But going to the bathroom is a dangerous mission. On the river fishing, not a problem, no problem all day. So we ended up on the Connecticut, and the Connecticut is a very famous river, and the Connecticut is a very famous river for a reason. In fact, the first outfitter to have a lodge on this river in the 80s renamed it in his advertising. He called it the Chosen River because it was so good, he didn't want anyone else to figure out where his camp was. It is one of like I said, there's about 2.5 million salmon a year come into this system. This river is less than 50 miles long. It is one of the best chinook swinging rivers in the world. There are gigantic rainbow trout. There are grayling. There are all 5 species of salmon. The Connecticut lives up to its name, and it is very straightforward floating. If you wanted to do a trip yourself with Papa Bear, fly into the top of Pagadi Lake. You do not need to have high-end raft rowing skills to float and fish the Kanektok. And it is completely freaking loaded with fish. And gorgeous campsites. And gorgeous floating. And gorgeous rainbow trout. I will picture here, I bet you Justin will picture for the rest of his life, a couple of fish that we lost. How long will you regret that one you lost on that gravel bar across from our only bad camp?
That was a beautiful thing.
Long time.
Long time, yeah.
There's just, the Western Alaska, they call them leopard bows. They're just covered in spots. They're really, and Justin was the master of making rainbows eat. The salmon wanted to eat for me. And Arctic grayling, we're gonna talk a lot about grayling. Grayling are greatly underrated fish. And sockeye salmon. So once again, this is one of those rare rivers. Sockeyes have a reputation for not eating flies because they're plankton feeders in the ocean. And the reality is that probably only 1 in 1,000 sockeye will eat a fly. But when there's 3,000 sockeye an hour swimming past you, the sockeye fishing is pretty freaking lights out. And that is, pound for pound, that is the strongest salmon there is. If sockeye got to king sizes, you would never, ever, ever land one. You can tell how far from camp we had to go. And I had to throw this photo in because it's actually my favorite photo of the trip. Let's see here. This is just a little example of, I took a random moment to just take some video of salmon swimming past. You can see that one has a seal hole in his head. So that little school is a continuous chain of fish every single minute, 24 hours a day for the entirety of the summer. It is just getting to witness the density of life in that part of the world is stunning. And the Dolly Varden. So mixed in with all those salmon are thousands and thousands of dollies. So Dolly Varden are the same species as a bull trout. This is the anadromous form of a bull trout. This dolly, I think, was the 12th one in 12 casts. And they are really pretty fish, and they fight really hard. Dollies are super cool. So eventually we had to leave the Kanektok and start hiking over to the Eek. And I would give, for tundra hiking, I would give this a 5 out of 10. It ain't great. It's not horrible. Except where it's horrible. Some bushwhacking, light swampiness.
I mean, that is so much organic matter.
So much life.
There's a lot of life in that. Oh.
And speaking of so much life, some level of bug life. Tundra was bad. There wasn't any good mosquito times on the tundra. The things that keep Alaska fishing, grizzly bears, mosquitoes, the weather. So we ended up on the Eek. This is our first camp. We decided that because we were on a trip where we were fish exploring, that we were professional fish explorers. Can add it to our business cards now. And as professional fish explorers, we had to find out if there's fish in the middle fork of the Eek River. And we had about, I'd say, what do you think, Justin, 5 eats on the mouse by grayling in the first 5 or so casts?
Yeah. Right there in front of that blue tent.
A lot of fish in the middle fork of the Eek. And neighbors. And big neighbors. This is a moose track, and that's a size 11 wading boot I have right there. There's a big moose. It's a really aesthetic little river. Like pool after pool after pool that just begs to be fished. And all of these rivers, they're all really pretty. Some chums. This is the coolest looking salmon. You guys are going to help me. This is my life crest. I'm going to rebrand the chum salmon.
Thank you.
I will never again call them chums. These are golden tiger salmon as long as I shall live. And I invite you to all join me in it. They're the greatest fighting fish there are. They just have a marketing problem. Golden tiger salmon. And Arctic grayling. We did not find old growth bows. What we found in the Middle Fork of the Eek is one of the most phenomenal Arctic grayling fisheries on the planet. The average size of these grayling is ridiculous. Grayling are not generally big fish. These are grayling big enough that they can get a full-on mouse fly in their jaw. Here's a grayling eating a mouse. Watch the fly. You get to see the fin come up, which is super cool.
Oh yeah.
Mousing is one of the coolest parts of Western Alaskan fishing. You know, they have a short season to grow. They got to get protein. It's not like here where it's got to be midnight and dark. You can get fish to eat a mouse at 2 in the afternoon. That's a big mouse fly. I'll give you an idea of the size of that grayling's mouth. I mean, that's a 3-inch mouse. They're really cool fish. Like the fin is insane. They fight really hard. It's like bluegill where they get that big side out there. They get that big fin out there and they just pull. And they're tasty. So we got into this part of the river, came out of the mountains, and it went out into these braids, and it basically turned into Alaskan Silver Creek, turned into a big spring creek. And we had a couple of magical days where in the afternoons, there was big yellow PMD looking mayflies coming off, and grayling potted up and sipping dry flies. And we went on a low-grade rampage. Here's some sipping grayling action.
Nice cast. Yeah.
Oh, you missed it? Luckily, it only takes 1
Nice.
before you get eaten again. Really pretty, like very spring creeky.
A nice one too.
That is a beautiful grayling.
Really nice.
You can't stop taking pictures of them. Like, it's one of the most aesthetic fish on the planet. I enjoyed doing the half in, half out. I got a little camera housing thing. And because nobody has been up there in 100 years, the beaver population is insane. This beaver lodge is bigger than this room we're in. And they were on every bend in the river. We got to see, like, beavers generally here, that's like a nocturnal animal. We got to see beavers doing beaver shit at like noon. Super cool. Watched them like drag whole trees across the river. Watched them like organize, they cut trees and like stack by size. There was one lodge where they had denuded every tree for like 200 yards except for one big old tree growing right out the middle of the lodge. I like Justin's theory that it's the house tree and you don't cut down the house tree. And at the bottom, where it gets wide and warm, you get to see the mountains, it gets really pretty. It becomes a pike fishery. I don't have any pike pictures because they were just post-spawn and they were real willing to chase our flies and not real willing to eat our flies. But frankly, watching pike chase your flies is really cool fishing. I get the feeling if we'd been a few weeks later, it would have been a pike rampage. Shows the utility of the 2-person packraft there. You can even stand up in the round of it. And then we had to leave, but we once again got to play in Howland Beavers. Gives the idea of the pilot's skill that he's about to land on that river. Wild takeoff when we left. I bet you we had 50 feet before the bend in the river when you got airborne.
Right.
This is what these trips are all about. I'll go back to that again. We caught amazing fish. We saw beautiful landscapes. But I got to hang out for a month with 2 of my best friends. And I would encourage all of you to think about what you're going to go do on a river with your best friends. Because you can do this to you. I am not special. I don't have special abilities. This is a doable thing. And when you do it, you think about what your next thing is. Share this, guys, with you guys, my secret map. That's my next 10 years. Fingers crossed. Thank you for coming. I'd love to answer questions.
What size rods?
Oh, what size rods? Spey rods, 9 and 10 weights. Single hand rods, anything less than an 8 is undergunned. Oh yeah, yeah. You're gonna blow rods up left and right.
How many did you carry?
Too many. I think I had 6 rods with me, which is more than we needed. Maybe not. You know, fly rods are like golf clubs. You don't want to play the game with a putter. Any other questions?
What kind of camera?
Oh, I'll answer that next. Yeah.
Patty, some of the pictures of those large sockeye, sockeye typically aren't that big. Are those 6-year fish?
I don't know, but it was the average size of sockeye in the connection was shockingly large. Like we caught a few that I bet were pushing 12, 13 pounds. You know, it's been the interesting thing about that part of Western Alaska. You're north of true Bristol Bay, and so you're north of most of the commercial fishing fleets. There's a lot less commercial sockeye seining up there, so it may be that you're just seeing more of the big guys. I don't know. Carl's a fish biologist back there. He's worked in Alaska. Thoughts, Carl?
Well, I did notice when I was up on the Kenai one year, and they had, this was years ago, emergency order of 2 fishing rigs. And all of a sudden the next day, they put the film net out. The next day they were just losing sockeye.
Interesting.
So
there you go.
You can shut it down right away.
So camera, you were asking, a mix of a cell phone and a Sony A7R. So a full frame but compact DSLR. My minor was in photography in college. I like shooting photos. Well, go fishing. Thanks. Guys. Whoever wants to lift the boat, there it is. If anyone wants to touch the muskox fur, there it is. Absolutely.